How many of you remember Christmas plays in grade school? Did you ever play the innkeeper, the cold one, the heartless one, the guy who looks at a pregnant Mary and says, "No room"? But what if I told you that's not how it happened? What if the innkeeper we've blamed for centuries was never the villain at all? Because Luke, the historian, the physician, used his words very carefully. So what did Luke actually mean when he wrote, "There was no room at the inn"? Was he referring to a public inn as in a hotel? Was he speaking of something like a roadside tavern? Could he have been referring to a crowded Bethlehem Airbnb? Or have we misunderstood the Christmas story all along? When Luke wants to describe a public inn, he uses a very specific Greek word, pandokion. This is the word Luke uses in Luke chapter 10 when he tells the story of the Good Samaritan, a beaten man, ignored by religious leaders, but rescued by a Samaritan. Luke says the Samaritan took the beaten man to a pandokion, a real public inn. So when Luke wants to describe a public inn or hotel, he uses the word pandokion. Luke knew exactly what word to use to describe where the beaten man was taken. Here's something we rarely talk about. Public inns in the first century had a terrible reputation. According to Jewish sources, they were known for corruption, immorality, even prostitution. This is not where Joseph would have taken Mary, and because of the horrible reputation of public inns, Jewish families placed an enormous emphasis on hospitality, especially toward relatives and strangers. The Bible declares that some have even entertained angels in their everyday practice of showing hospitality. Now here's where everything changes. In Luke chapter 2, Luke does not use pandokion. He uses a different word. He uses the word kataluma, which is the Greek word for guest chambers. The same word kataluma appears later when Jesus asks for a place to eat the Passover with his disciples. And every translation agrees and translates the word as guest room, guest chamber, or upper room. So Luke chapter 2 should read, "There was no room for them in the guest room," not a hotel, not a public inn. Here's the most likely scenario. Joseph and Mary arrived in Bethlehem, their ancestral home, expecting to stay with relatives who were also descendants of the lineage of King David. But the guest room was already full. And because several midwives and lots of water would have been necessary to facilitate the birth, the family did the best they could. They placed Mary in an area with a room large enough to accommodate all of the women who would be participants in the birth. Most ancient Middle Eastern homes reserved a large area near or under the house where they kept their livestock during the winter months. It would have contained plenty of straw, several feeding troughs called mangers, and water troughs. So they led her to the rear of the house to this large room, her midwives, and other servants with plenty of swaddling cloths, everything necessary to give birth to a baby. Additionally, Joseph's relatives were simply following the law of Moses. According to the book of Leviticus chapter 12 verses 1 to 4, Mary is required to separate herself during childbirth and remain separated 33 days after giving birth. Luke even tells us they were there for days before the birth happened and afterwards. This wasn't a cruel rejection. It was a case of crowded hospitality combined with following the law of Moses. Still, it troubles the heart, doesn't it? When we learn he had no palace, no comfort, no special treatment, and then we remember it was God's choice. Jesus chose humility, born lowly, so he could reach the lowest, born with nothing, so no one would think he couldn't understand their poverty. He entered the world quietly, so no one would ever say God doesn't know suffering. So when following Jesus makes you feel rejected, think of Joseph, Mary, and especially baby Jesus. Therefore, when obedience leads you through humbling places, think of that manger He wasn't born this way by accident. He was born this way for you and for me. And so now you know. There was never an unsympathetic innkeeper who was a villain to Joseph and Mary. No, Jesus being born in those humble and lowly circumstances was always the plan.